Hello, everyone. My name is S3P1 Dotan. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Medical Oncology at Fox Chase Cancer Center. And I'm delighted to present here in this really important workshop to learn how to improve the evidence-based treatment and decision-making in older patients with cancer. I'll be presenting the GIANT study, EA2186. This is a study led by ECOG Akron. And the goal of this trial is to randomize patients with metastatic pancreatic cancer who are older and a little bit more frail to gemcitabine and nab-paclitaxel versus 5-FU and Onivyde in the frontline setting. So to start off, I wanted to present some data that we have collected here at ECOG. On the left, you can see a graph of the main phase 3 clinical trial that were done in pancreatic cancer over the last 2 decades, basically showing that we have not done a very good job in improving our accrual of patients. And over this time, the median age has remained about 62. Whereas on the right, you'll see the real median age of patients with pancreatic cancer, which is 70 at diagnosis and 72 at death. So clearly there's a huge patient population that we are not enrolling on clinical trial, and we have lack of data regarding their treatment approach and appropriate management. So the rationale behind this study was to really focus on real-world patients that are commonly seen in clinic, but not typically included in clinical trials. We wanted to obtain baseline data on the efficacy and tolerability of the frontline combination chemotherapy in this patient population, as well as look at geriatric factors and biomarkers of aging, as they are possible predictors of treatment response and tolerance in this patient population. And we hope this study would be a stepping stone for future trials in this area, really trying to hone in on the right treatment for this unique patient population. So let's look at the study design. We will recruit patients over the age of 70 with ECOG performance status of 0 to 2, and all patients will undergo a screening geriatric assessment. And the goal of this assessment is really to find that vulnerable group of patients. So fit patients, those without any geriatric abnormalities, will be treated off trial based on physician discretion. Frail patients, those with severe geriatric abnormalities, will be treated off study, most likely with supportive care measures. And the vulnerable group of patients is the group that we are interested in. That group will be randomized to modified gemcitabine and nab-paclitaxel versus 5-FU and liposomal irinotecan. That group will also undergo a full geriatric assessment and a quality of life evaluation before they go on treatment. And the treatment will go on until disease progression with repeated evaluation of geriatric assessment and quality of life every 8 weeks. The primary endpoint is overall survival, and you can see the secondary endpoint listed here, including endpoints that are specific to older adults, looking at adverse events and some exploratory endpoint. So I want to highlight a few points in this trial that we really paid a lot of attention to in terms of how to conduct an elderly-specific trial. And the first one is this screening geriatric assessment, which I will talk a little bit about more in the next few slides. The second one is the fact that we included the full geriatric assessment, as well as focusing on quality of life, which are really important factors to evaluate in this patient population. The third is the fact that we are collecting this information throughout the continuum of the study. So this will be repeated throughout the trial, and we can see changes, and we can see how this affects the outcome. And finally, looking at endpoints. So thinking about endpoints that are important for older patients. Efficacy, overall survival may not be the most important patient when we think about studies in older adults. In terms of eligibility, we also paid a lot of attention to how to write this eligibility criteria, trying to keep this very open, focused on real-world patient, not limiting for any severe comorbidities that are unlikely to interact with the diagnosis of metastatic pancreatic cancer. And again, thinking about the screening geriatric assessment to really help us identify the right patient population. So let's talk a little bit about the screening geriatric assessment. So when we put this together, we looked at some prior studies that developed these kind of assessment, but also thought about what are the most important domains that we want to focus on and the clinically relevant factors in this particular disease. And we came up with three main areas: functional status, comorbidities, and cognition. So as you can see, any moderate or mild abnormality in these domains will qualify the patient as vulnerable, as you can see here in the orange column. And in addition, we decided that if a patient is over the age of 80, they will automatically qualify as vulnerable, as by age alone, these type of patients will most likely be comfortable with receiving dose-reduced therapy and not standard aggressive chemotherapy. This is the full geriatric assessment that we will be conducting on the trial, and you can see it covers really all the domains. This assessment was, again, thought of very thoroughly. We wanted to make sure this is something that could be done in every site, community sites, academic sites, sites that have geriatric oncology expertise, and sites that don't. Most of this assessment is done by the patient through questionnaires that are very easy to administer, and others are done by the research assistant. We actually have a study that was done by Huria et al. A few years back that demonstrated the ability to conduct this through a clinical trial with overall about 20 minutes time to complete this by the patient and the study team. We also added the quality of life measure by the FACT-HEP questionnaire. And again, quality of life is a very important factor to evaluate in this patient population and may play a really significant role in helping patients make their decision regarding therapy. And as I said earlier, we also decided to follow this throughout the treatment on the trial. And the importance here is really to try and assess any changes and differences that occur based on therapy, because that is a very important endpoint as we think about treatment of older patients. In terms of outcome, we paid a lot of attention to outcomes that are specific to older patients, thinking about collecting toxicities that are specific to older adults. So things that are typically not collected on large clinical trials, like healthcare utilization, deterioration of performance status, will all be collected on this trial. We're interested to see dose reductions, treatment discontinuation, ER visits, hospitalization, etc., and really focus on things like peripheral neuropathy, which can be detrimental and cause falls in this patient population. And at the lower part of the slides, you can see our correlative studies. We will look at sarcopenia and biomarkers of aging. And really, these are factors that are important to try and move the needle forward and understand other processes that occur in this patient. So I thought it would be good to summarize the main areas that we focused on as we developed this trial and how we incorporated these principles and the principles of elderly-specific clinical trial design into this study. And this will hopefully help others as they try to develop these type of trials. So the first one was thinking about patient selection and developing a screening geriatric assessment that will help us identify these patients very, very clearly. The second one was collecting data to inform the care of older adults. So thinking about everything that we can collect on this trial, that we can learn about this patient population and hopefully get a better understanding of what are the factors that are important in their care. So conducting a full geriatric assessment is number one. Evaluating the function of the patient throughout the trial, as well as the quality of life throughout the trial, and recording adverse events that are important for older adults. So shying away from the standard criteria that we use in clinical trial and thinking more broadly at what is important for this patient population. The next point is eligibility criteria. So we really aim to fit a wide range of real-world patients. We're trying not to limit them with things that are not relevant for this particular trial. And finally, the sites. The study is open through the cooperative group network with extensive access to community sites, which is where most of older patients are being treated. And I think thinking about the trial, the tools that we use, making sure that it is doable in a community site was also really important. And this is the perfect study to conduct in that environment. One last point that I wanted to make, which is unique about this trial. So this trial really highlights a great partnership with pharma. The study is supported by Ipsen, that is providing us with the liposomal irinotecan that is currently not approved in the frontline setting. And I wanted to highlight that the company does have a phase 3 study that's ongoing in this setting using a more aggressive form of chemotherapy in this patient population. However, this is not a study where older adults can accrue on, and they're not going to be eligible for this trial, especially not vulnerable patients. And I want to commend the company for understanding the need to address this special patient population, understanding that these patients are very common in our clinic, and there's a huge amount of data and evidence that we can gain from this trial that could help us understand how to use this drug in this vulnerable population. So I really hope that other companies will see the importance of thinking about this patient population and developing ways to either include them in studies or develop specific studies for them. So I wanted to end with this figure from JAMA Oncology. This is a really interesting paper that highlights all these issues and say that, you know, we are still having issues with enrolling older patients in clinical trial, but I really believe that we can do it. So thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.